Hello and welcome to Take Your Time, a Persona 5 Strikers in sort of real-time podcast where we're playing Persona 5 Strikers not in real time but along with the game as we take our time to play through it because we love Persona 5 and we're talking about it and having a great time as I play through it for the first time, I being Jonathon Dornbush and the we being my co-host Tom Marks. Tom, hello.
It's been a while. That was nostalgic for me to hear you just go for like 30 seconds.
Happy to do it. Again, had a little bit of coffee this morning right before the show, and so suddenly it's kicked in. It's decided to kick in just now, but like definitely half hour into the show, I'm gonna get snoozy.
Great.
But hello, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm excited to talk about this jail.
Me as well. We are going to be jumping into the Sapporo Jail, of course, talking about the entirety of it. We are, as usual, going through up until essentially when you can hit the road to your next location is kind of where we are in this episode. Before we get into things, we're going to be talking about figuring out exactly next week's episode in between them. So we'll obviously say at the beginning of next week's episode, the following to this one, what that episode will entail. So if you didn't play everything, you can play a little bit through. And if you did play through more than that, you know where we'll be stopping. But Tom and I, without spoiling it for me, we're discussing it before the show. And Tom, you're recommending that we're going to start a little bit into the beginning of the next location, Okinawa, but not... We haven't decided the exact stopping point just yet.
Yeah, we're going to figure it out, but basically, like, there's probably, like, a 15 to 20 minutes worth of gameplay window that we will stop at when you kind of arrive there, and are able to save and do that stuff and wander around. I'm not entirely sure, but we're not going to get into, like... We're not going to get into the meat of what's happening on the next one, so we'll come back and let you know at the beginning of next episode, like, where we decided to cut off, basically.
Cool. Well, that sounds good to me, and my computer's continuing to bug out. Weirdly, we were talking about this before the record, so I'm going to pull up the run of show on my phone.
Oh, no.
But while I do that, Tom, we do, of course, have our housekeeping at the beginning of the show, so let's start off with our pop quiz question from last week.
Corn,
Tom.
What?
So just once or twice a day, I'd log on to Twitter, and there would just be another just random reply to me. No context. Just corn, boiled corn, just there. Once in a while. I'm going to probably be getting these for the rest of my life, I think.
That was, for those who don't know, Jonathon, just recently left IGN and as of recording this and was the host of Podcast Beyond, the PlayStation podcast over there. And I conveniently was a guest this week and I didn't have anything to shout out at the end of the podcast. So I just told everybody and anybody to go tweet at him boiled corn with no context whatsoever. And it seems to be working. So that's great. And I'm happy about it.
What's great about it to me is, like, I don't know if any of these people... Did you mention Take Your Time? Like, did they know the show?
No.
No? Okay, cool.
I did not.
I was like, should I shout out all these people? But knowing that they might not even ever hear this show, I'm not going to for now. No offense to you, but thank you for doing this, because it has been a very funny joy to be like, oh, let me check what's going on today. Oh, there's another corn. Cool. Gotcha.
If anybody needs hints about my D&D alignment, I could have shouted out the show. And I didn't. I just told people to tweet him corn.
Yep. Yeah. Tells you a lot about a person pretty instantly. Anyway, let's remind people what the question was. I'll give my answer.
The funny thing is we also did get a tweet. I got a tweet from Diego that, like, I didn't plan this, but also currently in the zeitgeist of when we recorded this is this whole, like, little boy auto-tuned singing about corn.
It's got
from
the
this
juice.
interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. From, of course, auto-tuned by the amazing Shmoyoho, who have done all those auto-tune songs over the years. Like, anyway.
Every auto-tune ever.
Yeah, every auto-tune ever. No, like auto-tune the news and that sort of stuff. So, this was a very, like, I was just excited to do a quiz about corn, but it ended up being just a gift that kept on giving.
It really is.
It does have the juice.
It does. Anyway.
So, we got some responses. There were a couple people who got this right, but Jonathon, I want to throw it to you. The question was, which of these 4 corns can you not buy at the corn stand in Sapporo? The options were boiled corn, grilled raw corn, or wow, grilled corn.
Yes. And I've seen answers, but I don't know who's correct. I haven't, you haven't let on. And I didn't go back because I wanted to be able to come in fresh for this. And so I think I've ended up going with the raw corn choice.
Grilled raw corn.
Grilled raw corn, yes.
Well, you got to specify, because it's not raw corn.
Sure, of course. No, it's grilled raw corn, because that makes sense, Tom.
Yeah. Listen, the game wouldn't put something in if it didn't make sense, right?
That's fair. It's never happened before.
So, to free us from this, grilled raw corn is correct.
Good.
But also, it's kind of a trick question. First of all, Kirsten on Spotify got this right. Elek on YouTube got it right, and John over on YouTube said, I think it's grilled raw corn, though to be fair, wow, grilled corn does sound amazing. It's true. The answer to this question is, you can buy boiled corn, grilled corn, and wow, with an exclamation point, grilled corn, at the corn stand. But if you also on, I think it's the second day you're in Sapporo, Makoto will be standing outside of the corn stand, and if you talk to Makoto, she's like, hey, we gotta get some corn, and she gets you corn, and it's grilled raw corn.
Oh,
so
I did
grilled
get
raw
that from
corn,
her.
Yeah, so grilled raw corn is also an item you get, but you only get one of it and you can't buy it. And the description for grilled raw corn in your inventory, which does the exact same thing as grilled corn, I will point out, is given to you by Makoto. Aren't those antonyms? That is literally the description of the item. Man,
the localization team had some fun there. I assume that's also a joke in the original, but that is very funny.
This is why I spent way too much time on corn, because this whole thing is just remarkable to
That's incredible. That's all. It's so funny that the game recognizes that too, but it's in there as a joke. That's really good.
Anyway, we are free from this corny mortal coil, and we've moved on. We never have to talk about corn again.
We'll never be free, Tom. This is...
You know what the biggest punchline of this whole thing is?
You don't even eat corn?
No, they're just not very good items.
Oh, they're
fair. Fine.
Yeah.
They heal a little bit.
I didn't buy any of them. Yeah. But, we're never going to escape corn. Corn is going to be... Someone, please, out there, anyone good at art, please make a corn persona for us. And have its name be grilled raw corn. And yeah, create that persona for us, please, because I'm not good at art.
You know how there are some personas that kind of level up? There's very clearly a progression of them. Mm-hmm. That's grilled corn, grilled raw corn, wow, grilled corn.
Yeah, that's got to be the Pokemon evolution of these personas. Anyway, thank you to everyone who guessed on that one. Thank you to everyone who continues to comment toward me. I really genuinely hope this never ends, because it will just be so funny 10 years from now to be getting corn on Twitter. Twitter's gonna be around in 10 years, who knows. Anyway, we also got some comments this week, both on youtube.com/Dornology, where you can tune into the YouTube versions and leave comments, and as well an email at dornology@gmail.com. Comments wise from YouTube, I'm gonna read from Mitch, who said you guys should get a guest host for the finale of season 2 from the Japanese Tourism Board to tell us about how great tourism is in Japan. And that does really feel like the end game of this game in particular.
Yeah.
I will say there is a moment in this week's episode we'll talk about that, oh boy, does that tourism board kick in.
I'm
anyway,
excited.
Elek, of course, freaking commenter, also said, I think the ingredient that I was referring to last week was rice, which it was, the ingredient I couldn't find, because I'm pretty sure I looked everywhere to buy some and couldn't find it. But now I know you can get it in Sophia's shop. Thanks, Tom. Also, we certainly need a Game of Thrones or Rings of Power type map for all of us who aren't from Japan or super familiar with Japan geography to get a sense of where we are. And that's fair, because I do think we've noticed in the comments a week or two ago, people were confused about why did we pass Hokkaido when actually we're in Hokkaido, and it's just Sapporo is the capital. Definitely.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end of this episode too, as we talk about where they're heading next.
For sure, yeah. It's definitely if you don't know Japanese geography, which granted I do not, it can seem immediately confusing. But yeah. I say that, and then sometimes I'm confused about where states are in the, north and south, axes of the United States. So,
Sure.
Even if I lived there, it'd probably be confusing. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, Amy wrote in to dornology@gmail.com, like you can, with the subject line, corn.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for bringing us back.
Exactly. Amy, of course, said that it's not about corn, but just it was too good of an opportunity to not write in that way. Anyway, I need to go over to the email on my screen because my computer's being funny. Anyway, Amy wrote in and said, "Hey, Jonathan and Tom, just wanted to send a quick message to express my appreciation for taking your time. I actually had the idea of playing through P5R in real time a few months ago after finishing the game myself for the first time, and found the podcast after doing a quick Google search to see if anyone else had already done it." Which means the SEO is working.
Oh, yeah.
After playing catch-up over the past month or two with all of the Royal episodes, my god, and now moving into Strikers, it's been so much fun hearing your thoughts and discussions every episode, so thank you both for creating such a fun show. Royal's third semester is pretty hard to top for me personally, but some of the story beats in Strikers are also amazing, so I can't wait to hear how it goes for you both. All the best from Ireland, Amy. And yeah, just want to say thank you again, as we've said. I think more so on the Royal podcast because it hasn't come up as much here, but obviously we hope these shows can be experienced at any point, not even just when they're going on. So hopefully if you're enjoying the show as it's going on, we're so happy you're here along with us. But if you're enjoying it way after the fact too, we hope the show can work that way. So glad to hear it. Yeah. With that said, it's time to jump in to this week's jail, Hyodo's jail, August 10th through 13th, I think we're technically covering this week. And we've got a bit to talk about. Of course, a bit not really being the jail itself, because the jails are very much the jails, but there's some stuff in there to talk about.
Yeah. And this one at least, I think it was... this one made how generic the last one was pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
Like, because there were, like, more unique sort of things going on with, like, the snowboarding, which we can get to, and that the ice and all that jazz.
The
so,
heaters
yeah.
and... Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, it is very... I would say one of the biggest knocks you can make against this game is the sort of formulaic nature of the jails so far.
Yeah.
In how similar they are. Obviously, you know, the palaces were similar in the sense of what you were doing at the end result was structurally the same, but they had a lot of differences in them that kept the variety up, and obviously them just being different layouts. But here, even the layouts don't feel as important to me in the way the palaces did. I think because they're larger areas and it's more about just getting through them. Often.
Yeah. The other thing that is partially kind of like why they feel a little bit more, what's the right word, like sterile, is the palaces felt like, and this is something actually that we will get into later in this episode, the palaces felt like extensions of the ruler's psyche in a very real way. Like, it was, their distortion was creating this world, and therefore you could learn a lot about the ruler based off of, oh wow, you know, Madarame turned people into paintings because that's how he sees them, right? Or like, you know, all stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas or what was it? Oh god, how am I blanking on his name? The politician, the main bad guy.
Oh my god, yeah, no, wow, thanks. Now I'm blanking too.
Why is it happen? Brains are the worst. Cheeto, thank you.
I really thought you said Cheeto for a second. I'm like, that's not right.
Like, the idea that Shido has sections in his palace where, like, literally he just sees people as rats, right? Yeah. Is, like, that's very informs who the character is. And this game, which partly for reasons we will talk about later with Morgana, does not have that as much.
Yeah.
Where you still get some stuff, right? Like, Hyodo, the world is icy because she's cold and closed off or whatever. But, like, you don't really get as much personality about the ruler in the actual environment in the way that you did in Persona 5 Royal. And that does make them feel, you know, just a little bit more sterile than they would otherwise.
I do also think to a certain extent, and again, they're different games, so it's not comparing exactly, but it's hard not to just when they are, you know, connected in this way. But because of the way 5 or Royal lets you play out, even if you do the palace in one go, you're still playing into a given ruler story over, you know, 10 to 12 hours of a game, and with so many interstitial little things popping up, it made each kind of mini story feel a little bit more meaty. Whereas this is very much, for me, it is like the little bit at the beginning, go through the jail, a little bit at the end, move on to the next thing. And again, like I'm enjoying parts of it. I'm not like disliking it, but I think the formula, it shows through a bit more here.
Yeah. And it gives us less to talk about in terms of absolute specifics, right, for each jail.
Exactly. So we can get into this jail, which is, of course, Hyodo's jail. As we mentioned at the end of last week, it's ice-themed. It's a wintry ice palace with a couple hints at the beginning. We'll talk about it at the end, but there is a slight hint toward a food theme that pops up at the very end. You can see a couple utensils sticking out of like the main palace, but other than that, you sort of just get the hint that this is a ice themed world. It's cool, it's chilly, it's all that sort of thing. Right. Obviously, as we know going into this, we're attached to sort of a personal Haru story here, which you assume then psychic damage would be pretty good to bring along the way. I will talk about my team makeup in a little bit, because I did actually pretty much like half and half this jail with my team. Anyway, as we get into the jail, it is still the familiar sort of going to the 3 keeps, getting 3 cores, but the way we're getting around this area is a little bit different, because essentially we are funneled to specific points to get to those cores, because there are giant ice walls blocking our passage.
Yeah. Which, to be fair to what I just said, is a metaphor, right, for her putting up literal walls, right?
Yeah.
So there is not none of that.
No, totally. But it's something that I think you get so much more of it in retrospect, that even you just saying that now, I didn't really think about, because by the time we really get into the idea of her putting up walls, that happens at the very end of the jail.
Right.
And so like I'm way past the ice walls being a part of my flow. Sure. But anyway, you're getting through these ice walls and seemingly having to go the way that you have to. It, of course, gets you to the cores that you need to, but along the way lets you hit certain different mini-bosses, introduces a couple different puzzle things. I'm trying to look at the first area. It's basically just the ice walls, and you get the sense of those ice blocks that you can move around, right, that both play into puzzle, platforming, as well as combat. You can use those to hit enemies.
Yeah, it's a little bit like sliding them is like a little bit clunky, because you have to like hide on a side and then hit them, but also it is a very well utilized mechanic. It shows up in a lot of different combats. It does, like you said, you occasionally have to use it to like hop higher or like push something, to climb up to another thing. Like, so I think in terms of, it's a simple mechanic, but it's one that they actually make pretty good use of multiple times throughout the jail, which is cool to see. Agreed.
Yeah, it's something that feels more intrinsic in a way that I guess like the invisible platforms didn't in Natsume's.
Right.
And even then, at the end of the day, any sort of like invisible platform where you just have to hit your button is less a puzzle and more so just a like, oh, you forgot the first time, so here's a thing to remind you. But I agree. They're used pretty well. There's one larger puzzle with them toward the end of it that you're needing to get through, and then there's also a treasure chest you can pick up on the side. The only thing I'll say about that one, my like biggest critique was like, I wish there were more of these puzzles, because that one is so easy it feels like the initial puzzle, but it's like almost the last one.
Yeah, it's very funny that they put in this literal overhead camera view of this sliding block puzzle, and you're like, oh cool, new mechanic, and then they just never use it again.
Like that should have been probably in each prison keep, and then it gets progressively more difficult as you go.
Right.
And I think
but then where would the snowboarding go?
Indeed. Well, before we get to the snowboarding, we do get 2 heaters.
Yeah.
We pick up the first core, and then a storm hits.
Yeah, this palace, or this jail, does shake up the formula a little bit, in that there aren't like... The previous 2 jails kind of had like a main warden, or like a guard usually, like a keep guard, you would have to sort of like be like a mini boss or whatever. This one doesn't have that as much. The main fights are sort of like group fights, and even in this first one, right, it just lets you walk right in and pick the thing up and then walk out. And then the blizzard hits, which makes it difficult to see unless you use Phantom Eye, basically.
Yeah, or like I used basically a combo of that and just looked at the minimap to see my relative location, and it's not really obtrusive. It's just more of an effect sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's thematic and fun that you're fighting off this blizzard, turning on these heaters.
Yeah, no, totally. It works in that way, and then as you keep going, we'll have these the heaters and the storms pop up again. But anyway, we turn this first heater on, and when we go back to the main area to keep moving, we find an ice wall is gone, so Morgana suspects, of course, the heater's power is melting these walls to help us progress a little bit.
Sure.
So one my favorite part here, though, about this was like Makoto, I think I got this word for word. Makoto says, "Remember, we're in the metaverse. Some things we just have to accept and move on." And I like that the thing they're accepting is that heater's melted ice.
Yeah.
But,
well, to be fair, its heater's like a mile away.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's just, it was just a very funny line that is so, I think, epitomizes Persona to a certain extent with this game.
It does, yeah.
Anyway, as you said, we get to another area and it's snowy and we have to snowboard.
Yeah.
Which I was surprised about.
This area has two kind of defining factors, which are the first snowboarding section, the first of two, and just tons of Mothmen.
So many.
Oh my Mothmen God. Being weak to gun and therefore push over easy the entire time.
Especially if you have Yusuke or An, because they have like 60 bullets and they're rapid fire.
Or Haru.
Haru's area of effect one. Yeah.
Well, Haru, if you get to, I think it's her third, like one of those, I can't remember the name of them, those skills that show up if you play them enough. Yeah, the Master Arts, thank you. Her third one, I think it is that you never run out of ammo. Like, Haru never runs out of ammo if you just hold down triangle.
I did not get that one yet.
Yeah, so if you get that one, you just hold down triangle and just, like, plow through waves and waves of Mothmen and never run out of ammo.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, so anyway, yeah, the Mothmen are pretty easy to get through unless you run out of bullets during a given battle and you happen to have not cleared them out, then it can be a little annoying just because there's no other weakness there. But yeah, there's that. And then, of course, the snowboarding, which, sort of like the ice puzzles, is pretty simple. Essentially, you're just going down the mountains and wanting to barrel into all the guys. The first couple times it happened, I was able to, I think, kill them all as I went. There's like a final snowboard where I didn't. And I was like, no, come on. I'm snowboarding, man. Let it be cool. But yeah. Again, it's just like it adds a little variety. It also, I think, helps them build levels in a different way, because if you had to,
you get some verticality.
Exactly. If you had to walk all that way, it would be pretty boring. So
right,
yeah, I think it adds to it, even if it's a very simple thing. Again,
it's neat.
So anyway, I know we're kind of blowing through it, but that's just kind of the nature with this jail.
Yeah,
and then
it does feel like a shorter jail, to be honest.
It really did feel pretty quick.
Everything's pretty compact. The paths, that first keep is pretty long, where you have to go around the whole outside perimeter and do the heaters. But the third keep especially is basically just like you hop up that ice wall automatically, you snowboard down that hill, and then you're just done. Yeah. Like it's nothing beyond that. And they even very smartly, I think this is very, very heads up of them, put a checkpoint at the top of the hill and the bottom of the hill, so that if you miss those items, you can just immediately checkpoint back to the top of the hill and go down again. Exactly.
No, yeah, that you're right. That first one with the heaters, I think, felt like the biggest chunk of the jail. Especially because this is just the way I work. I'm like, okay, I know where I need to go because I know how the keeps work. So I'm going to go around the entire area first, take out all the men. And I was like, what are these big heaters doing here? That's weird. And then I knew where all of them were. So I didn't even need the, like, it tells you where to go. I didn't even need that because I was like, I've seen these all. It's fine.
That's very funny.
But anyway, so yeah, you get the third keep. And then after that, you see sort of this army of Jack Frosts going by under Hyodo's control. And they're doing, cleanup.
Yeah.
They're doing a big cleanup patrol, basically.
The He-Horde, as Futaba calls them, the He-Horde from Hell.
Yep.
And there's a very good there's a very good bit of everyone yelling "hee-ho" real loud.
Who does it get to? It like bothers one of them.
I think Makoto literally says, wait, there's a line, Makoto says I know I wrote this down.
Well,
where'd it go?
well, you search for it.
Oh, yeah, there it is, it is. Literally, everyone starts saying Hyo, and then Makoto just goes, all right, good bit, let's go. Like, she literally says good bit. Like,
there's been one or two times where...
That's what it was.
They're like, okay, the joke is over, let's move on.
Yeah. This game, I think, is very, like, the translation or the localization or whatever it is, or maybe it's just the writing, I don't know, is very, like, self-aware in a way that the first game, not that the first game wasn't, but like it kind of knows what Persona fans want or expect a little bit more.
For sure. But so anyway, we see that horde and then we bounce out. That little joke about the he horde happening happens. But so we leave and we're going to the van, but we see Hyodo in the park nearby in the real world. Again, shouting at an employee. Yeah, very conveniently. Shouting at an employee who is sick, who is very clearly sick and coughing up. So we actually go to step in sometime, and she says she's not being horrible, that it's necessary to keep the city functioning. The staff sort of works as cleanup to both keep them in line and to help promote like public safety. But as I kind of was noting during this, the veneer of her being kind that she was to them, like she kind of turned away from that employee the last time and was very polite to them the whole time she was with them. This time she just leans into it, like she is still very angry, and Haru confronts her about it.
And she literally has the quote, "Everyone working for Sapporo City Hall is a worthless piece of garbage."
Yep.
Which is just like a wild thing to say out loud.
Yeah.
Let alone to kids when you're the mayor.
It's really interesting, and obviously you can tell something is getting to her as we learn, but she like has no filter here. There is no sort of as we saw before, the nice part of her that like that first scene made you question how much of that was real versus how much of it was an act, versus now seeing versus corruption. Here she is pretty much rude the entire time through.
Yeah.
And Haru confronts her about it. Hyodo says she basically can't stop going for her sake, mentions a mysterious her, who of course we'll learn about later, but sort of applies, things aren't great. And that's kind of the end of that day. Unless I'm forgetting anything.
No, that's basically it. They kind of put the metaphor of the palace into more precise words, right? When Haru says she's become so cold, she used to be so warm. Oh, it's Frozen Palace, right? And then also there's the Snow City and all that stuff.
Yeah, and we'll get into mixed metaphors in a second, because there's then a second metaphor that comes in that it didn't need. Yeah,
we can talk about that. Overall, though, I will say, I enjoy this jail. I think we were kind of being, harsh of jails generally, but I do think that this jail is better than, or at least more interesting than Ongo's. Like, the snowboarding stuff is pretty thin, but the theme is cool, right? Like, I enjoy it. I think there's some
it's pretty cool.
I think there's some fun, hard fights. I think it makes you shake up your team a decent amount, right? For we're getting to the point where the weaknesses of enemies are starting to get a little more narrowed, and so you kind of have to be prepared a little bit more, or be willing to swap up a little bit more. I think it is a fun jail for sure.
No, me too. I think my initial, stuff we were talking at the beginning, I wanted to get through the jail before saying any more. It's weird. I spent the first 10 minutes being I'm kind of the jail repetitiveness is getting to me a little bit, but weirdly I did enjoy this jail more. And I'm trying to put my finger on exactly why, but I think it's a mixture of, one, it's not a particularly long jail, which is not the best thing to say, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. I do think the pace of it and the way that it funnels you through is more interesting. And the more light use of puzzles that Natsume's jail just really didn't have.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed this, how often you left the jail.
Only once or twice.
So the other thing that kind of happens in the middle of all of this is that you now get requests, or at least in this case, every time you beat a prison keep, you could leave and get more requests.
Oh, okay, because that brings up my complaint about August 11th, when I woke up to 11 requests and was like, what the hell, game? I'm in the middle of a jail. Why is this happening?
So my pace was kind of every time I finished a prison keep and I got back to that central checkpoint in that main plaza, I would bail and I would, just go shop and, do whatever.
Yeah.
And every time I left, I had like 3 to 5 more requests, which was convenient to get them in the middle of the jail because then they were to go kill things in the jail largely. And it wasn't really an issue.
I wish I knew that. I'll know that for next time. But yeah, I just didn't. I don't think then I must have not left until the second part of the jail, like until this coming bit. Because I didn't get any extra requests until the next day. So I must have not left once. But yeah, we can talk about the request stuff in a second. To your point about the weaknesses as well, I wanted to say, because I mentioned it earlier, for this first day, I largely used on Morgana and Sophia.
Okay.
Because there were more weaknesses later on, and there was some side damage you needed, but they were less frequent in the first part of the jail. And so fire, wind, and bless actually helped me a lot more than anything else. Yeah,
because, I think that's a good mix. I think I did on Morgana Haru for the most of it. Yeah. And then I started switching in Makoto towards the end and some Sophia towards the end.
Yeah. My next section, I used Haru, Makoto, and then Ryoji, with a little bit of Yusuke just to get him leveled up, because he was really falling down the list.
Ice Guy in the Ice Jail.
Not ideal. Yeah. It's like bringing a water Pokemon to a water gym. But yeah, so anyway, August 11th happens. I woke up to 11 requests, so I spent the very beginning. It wasn't that bad. I'll say it felt very overwhelming. But if I consider 2 of those were like Persona Present Velvet Room requests, and then the rest were relatively easy. Like one of them required you to hit 50 of them with a weakness, which was whatever, but pretty simple.
Yeah. And there were the slimes, I think, in the Sendai jail, so it was like you fight a lot of those at once.
Exactly, yeah. So it took like 3 fights maybe at most. And then in this jail, you could usually knock out 2 in one location. So I really only had to go to like 2 or 3 spots max and was able to get everything.
Right.
So it wasn't bad. And like you said, it's really good to keep up with these requests because they do open more stuff for the shop. They open... more of your bond limits and things like that.
Yeah, you start unlocking the bond skills. I don't know where you've been spending your bond skill money. I'm now at the point where I have 3 of them maxed by the end of this play session, I think.
Oh, wow. I just have 1.
Because I was saving up for a couple of them. So I have the one that is sales in Sophia's shop is maxed. Amount of healing that items do is maxed. And then, the Futaba support one, where at the end of a fight, she gives you HP and SP every time, is just, like, a really good way to be like, well, this person's low on SP, so I just, like, won't use their abilities for a bit, and then they'll be full in a few fights. It's, like, pretty valuable.
I really need to update that one. I think I'm, like, a couple in, but yeah, I could...
It's super expensive.
Yeah. I was sort of spending across the board just to kind of get things moving and see what I was liking. But yeah, that one is very much you need to at least do this a couple times. It's so good.
Yeah, even just once is kind of night and day in terms of how much it can help.
Exactly, especially for big, ongoing, long fights.
Yeah.
Anyway, we get into the August 11th side of things, and we start to get, this is when you can walk up the jail big...
Oh, wait, there was one other thing, though.
Oh,
yes. Did you do the request? The king of all ramen request?
Oh, yes, yeah. There is a more story-based request, which I liked. I was happy this was here. There is a request line that becomes 2 requests, actually. Ryuji wanting to get really delicious ramen.
Yeah, and it being, like, super limited edition, so you gotta go help a guy, you gotta go get meal tickets from a dude, but then the meal tickets are being hoarded because the chef has an elbow problem, and so then you go into the metaverse to, like, kill some dudes to get materials to help his elbow. It's like, it's just such an elaborate, weird thing, but I really, like, I enjoy it a lot because it's a mix of, you get story stuff, you get moments with friends, you get to go in and do a fight that then tangibly gets you a thing, and, it's all just extra. You don't have to do any of it, but it is a much more interesting request than go kill 3 principality with their weakness, right?
Exactly. And I'm sure, again, not knowing, I'm sure we'll see at least 1 or 2 others like it, just because it seems like such a good idea. I'm sure it's not used here and then nowhere else. Even if it were, though, it does really make me feel... There's other games like this, too, where you get the side stuff and you see the, like, really cool version of what they could be doing, and you wish that were everything. And, like, I know, obviously things, limitations of time and budget and manpower and all those things can affect elements like that. But you see a great quest line like this on the side and you're like, oh, why can't more of the requests be like that? Like, I wish it was 2 or 3 per jail already had been like that. And it would make that experience, I think, feel so much richer. I think it's sort of the same thing that you see, very different games, but you see this as like the evolution of Spider-Man 2018 to Miles Morales. Where side stuff mattered a bit more. But even in 2018, obviously, like, people would get sick of the crimes a lot, but you get a few cool requests that are like, go through, figuring out a photo location in New York, and you have to remember a little bit about the locations, and you're learning a little bit about students at Peter's old school, and it's like, oh, this, like, builds on the world. Like, things that build on the world or characters are always more fulfilling to me. But it's hard to make a lot of those things and make them satisfying. So yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, we get back in, we start to get through things. The first real note out of this part of the jail that I have is like a tough fight between 2 big enemies.
That's the like last thing before the thing.
Yeah, everything
else. The thing
like,
before the thing. Sorry.
The thing before the thing, where we talk about the thing. Like,
before
there's
the
not
birdcage.
There's not really anything else major, I think, before it that stuck out to me.
No, it's just kind of a cool icy version of Ango's castle, sort of, and you fight some dudes, and they're fun fights, and you proceed your way through. Fun fact for anybody who is a Super Nintendo fan, or wants to see if I'm crazy, go look up the Yoshi's Island castle, like, mansion theme song, because it's the exact same music.
Interesting. Do you think, like, intended homage?
No.
Okay.
I think lawsuit worthy, but also it's not literally that close, but it is literally that close.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Gotcha. It's like a Vanilla Ice Queen sort of situation?
Yeah, kinda.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Wow, years from now we're going to read about how Tom started a lawsuit. Anyway, I will say I do like the music. So, I mean, I guess, I am
it's
really...
It's a good song, yeah.
I'm enjoying it, and especially the ice theme. It's very silly. It's probably my least favorite world in this other game, but it really evokes Kingdom Hearts 3's Frozen World, because you go through a really big ice palace. The music is somewhat similar to a certain extent. Like, it obviously, locales and types of locales bring out, I think, similarities in art ideas. So it's not crazy that ice would feel evocative of the same ways, but it's making me enjoy it a little bit more weirdly, even though I didn't love that level, but just having that connection in the back of my head.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to this tough fight. I actually found this fight pretty hard. I did want to just point it out just because basically you're dealing with 2 pretty large mini bosses, which I think this is the first time they've put 2 together who have completely different weaknesses. And so going too long on one, you're leaving the other completely full health. Like, you kind of maybe want to pick them apart isolated or try to do damage a little bit to both along the way, but knowing a weakness will only affect one. I liked what it forced me to do in this battle.
Me too. This is another example, though, or a good example of a problem I struggled with when I played this game the first time, at least, which is if you go into a fight like this and don't have the right people in your party, it feels bad, right? Yeah. Because then Joker is relied on to do, like, the only weakness using, like, abilities, and suddenly you're out of SP and you're just pumping SP items into him. It can feel really rough to just be like, oh, well, I just didn't have... In this case, it was you needed what was it?
It
Haru?
was Nuke and Sai, I believe. So yeah, you needed Haru and Makoto.
Yeah, and so, like, if you just didn't have one of those people in your party, or those people in your party, it was just like, well, this is a lot harder than it needs to be.
No, I agree, and that's been a thing throughout the game.
Yeah,
sure.
But I think even either way in this case, I do think it was a fun, challenging fight to try to, like you said, to try to have to navigate this thing that you haven't really been presented with in this game yet.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. It was like, by happenstance, my party for this grouping was Haru, Makoto, and Ryuji for this next leg of it. So it worked out perfectly for me. But yeah, it was one of those, had it not, boy, would I have just been feeling what I felt when I first played the original Jail, where it's like, well, I didn't bring anyone in I needed, and your best bet, honestly, is to just die and go back to the last checkpoint.
I had one of them in my party, so I was able to just kind of whittle them down. But yeah,
which is good.
It is not a very good feeling when literally the best solution is just let the enemy kill you.
Yeah, no, it's not ideal. It's not ideal. So anyway, we go through that fight, and we get to, of course, the birdcage and hear our moment of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a very weird thing to be like, time for that weekly moment of trauma. Brought to you by Persona 5 Strikers. And we get a flashback related to the ice sculpture catastrophe that we've heard about before, and the little girl who died, Kaho, I believe her name is, who, of course, we unfortunately learned that the sculpture killed. We hear two people talking about it, and someone wants to blame the mayor so that he can get a kickback, and obviously it sounds like there is some sort of bit of corruption happening here. And
yeah, it's a little bit like you don't get the full story until you actually get to the trauma cell or whatever. But this is them saying, "Hey, remember that random moment that we showed you hours ago, where the woman was mourning the grave spot? Yeah, that's relevant now." And you're like, "Okay, cool, thanks."
Yeah, it sets that up and starts to plant the kernel of the idea that obviously will become really important here, that Hyodo is not necessarily an awful person.
Sure, because she feels really bad in this memory.
And we get the full memory and we can talk about all that stuff there, but it starts to play in the idea of like, oh, okay, so maybe there are reasons she's acting this way. Anyway,
right.
We go out into the real world, and sort of get the sense that we learn a little bit more about the event itself. And that she wasn't blamed herself publicly because it was seen as an unforeseeable catastrophe that she couldn't have planned for. But it still sounds like the mother of the girl blamed her, is kind of what we learned there. Anyway, I did some extra requests here. I had a few left over, so I did those.
Nice.
Then you go to the accident site, and of course, jump in for the big trauma cell fight. Which, again, like the other ones, with the other... What are they called again? Wardens?
The actual name of the thing on their boss bar, health bar, is Lockkeeper, but I think they call them Wardens, yes.
Yeah. This one has with him 4 basically riot shields.
Yeah.
Do they do anything? Do they actually prevent attacks?
So I believe when the boss is putting them in front of them, it is they're more defended. They also can put them around them, and that lets them cast the defense up ability.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they are functionally actual walls necessarily.
Sure. I wasn't sure if it maybe blocked physical attacks, and I was just using physical so little that I didn't notice. But
no, I don't think it's that specific.
Okay. Yeah. For me, again, this is one of those fights that we've been through a lot of these before. I think with him, the biggest addition that was a challenge for me was when he would put all 4 shields down in a row and kind of ram at you. If you can't get out of the way, you're done. It knocks the hell out of you.
Yeah, this fight... So, once again, it is disappointing that this is the same visual creature again, but... The 4 shields plays very differently from the 4 swords person that was before it, right? Which was super, super fast. This one just basically sits there and lets you hit it for 12 hours. It has so much life.
Again, yeah, the bullet sponginess of these guys in particular is not great.
Yeah, but it's an interesting fight. There are a lot of moments where you can kind of like see that it's using that that defense all ability and try to interrupt it with Sigh or Bless or whatever to like break it out of that before it can get the ability off. So there are fun little strategic moments like that in this fight for sure. Totally. It just like lasts too long again.
Yeah. So anyway, we do that fight, and then we get to see a little bit more of this thing, and that we see.
Well, I think that happened. I think that happens before.
Oh,
but
does
yes.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, usually so we see the full thing. Sorry,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My apologies, because
No problem.
I forgot to write down where the boss was in this, so I just assumed that was there. Anyway.
Yeah, you get to see their whole deal, and then you watch them, and then you fight a boss.
Forgive me. For some reason, I thought it happened after that we got the big reveal.
Well, we've only been doing this for, a year and a half.
Yeah. It is worth then, I guess, pointing out the full extent of the conversation just to basically get into, like, the two businessmen. One of them is a little bit more cowering and cowardly. The other is talking about getting the mayor to resign so he can be the new mayor. She appears and discovers that plan, and the guy admits to hiring cheap labor that essentially accidentally caused the incident. This guy says he'll blame her publicly unless she goes along with it, so basically blackmailing him, or her, excuse me. She pleads with him to do the right thing, but what's right for him is the right thing to do in his mind. So basically we see a fuller extent of she has not been necessarily this obviously callous person. She wanted to do the right things and seems to have been put in a place where she let blackmail get to her. Obviously there are then discussions that come up in just a little bit about the nature of that. So let me just mention the next main beat is them talking about sending in the calling card and debating about how she's not really a bad person. They kind of debate who is at fault here.
Yeah.
Haru talks about how it's the other guy. Yusuke says, why not the contractors who did the bad work? And
yeah. We also get an answer to a question we had last week in this trauma memory, which is we were both like, how can a snow sculpture kill a person? And we kind of see the crumbled snow sculpture, and it is like the size of a building.
Yes, yeah, it is a massive thing.
So this was like an avalanche of snow that killed a child. It's not just like I was picturing like, David-sized human sculpture. This is like this is a lot of snow.
Oh yeah, I was at most like it was sort of like a table giant like centerpiece at a party to me. I was not picturing that. So yeah, it obviously explains that a little bit more. But yeah, so they're all debating who really is at fault here, which I think again plays into a thing that we've been talking about a little bit of essentially really getting into the idea of who is bad and what is bad for these people. So Zenkichi appears, of course, to help the argument along and kind of talks about why do we get to decide who's bad? Like, how are we the ones to make that argument? Because things aren't so black and white like that. He also gets upset, of course, that we didn't actually contact him to begin with here, so we fill him in on everything. He basically just tells us he thinks we're naive. He's like, yes, Hyodo was sort of cornered, and, we talk about how it isn't wrong that she was affected by blackmail and all these things, and he says, but she's a leader, and at the end of the day, the accident still falls on her, and she needs to take responsibility for it.
Right.
And that a real leader would take the fall here. And says that essentially the longer we keep the Hiero charade up, it's going to bite us in the ass. And we get the sense that, like, he also kind of, like, stops himself from saying a few things here. And you sort of get the sense that I think Zenkichi is starting to care about these kids in a way that his job didn't want him to do, is what I get from it. Obviously,
he's getting too close.
He is. He's really fallen for him in a way he shouldn't. But yeah,
He also is just, like, sad they forgot about him.
Yep, that's a really big moment. Yeah.
Like, he's not just like, it's not just like, God, you're supposed to keep me informed. He's like, what? How? But why didn't you? What? What's up? What about me? Like, he's so cute.
It's really, really funny. And so, they kind of talk about things, and Makoto agrees things aren't so neat, but, like, they can't just stop fighting. And I do think this conversation for me was just, like, really important as putting, taking the subtext of the last few jails and making it text of, like, hey, these aren't bad people inherently there are things that are creating badness, and obviously that the kernels of that badness are then being exacerbated or abused in a way that is snowballing, for lack of a better pun here for this jail, into something far worse than what those people were. And we have some discussions that happen later with it, but I think it's really important to me of like, especially here, you can see, I think, all the sides of the argument of maybe Hyodo should take the fall, but also you could very much understand why someone who just wants to do good thinks playing along to those horrible people, at least in this sense, and not causing too much issue might help. Like, because I think she wants to stay in power, so she continues to do things that she thinks will help.
Yeah. It is markedly, noticeably different than Shido, right?
Yes.
Where Shido was very much like, I want to make Japan amazing by being the best, right? Like, it was very him-focused.
Yeah.
Whereas Hyodo is doing bad things, but seems to genuinely be doing them for good reasons, or not good reasons, but like good motivations. She's abusing employees because she literally saw an employee cut a corner that killed a person and feels that guilt, and so she's taking it too far by saying, all of my staff members are idiots, and if I let any of them get out of line again, somebody could die, right? Yeah. And it's 100% not like condoning what she's doing, but it is motivated from a place that is not just self-serving entirely.
She's not, you're 100% right, because she's not she's not treating her employees horribly in this case, obviously, to go on a weird power trip, like to make
she doesn't get off on it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, obviously, I think right now you could argue maybe a little bit of her does by the distorted version of her, but yeah, it's
not like Alice, though, who is, like, literally enjoys stepping on dudes.
Exactly, yeah. There is, even within the jail leaders, we're seeing sort of a spectrum of badness.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is all sort of getting us to the calling card. Haru obviously wants to write it because of how personal this is to her. And then later at night, we get a text from her to go talk. And
this was very unexpected to me, and this whole conversation rules. Like, it is phenomenal.
It is sort of in the same way that we saw in the past jails with An and Yusuke, of giving them a moment to reflect on the emotional journey they've gone through. And she, she feels bad that she forgot about Hyodo in her life. She talks about sort of how she got so used to, like, hiding her feelings away after her father's death and running from the past and kind of, like, isolating those things that could hurt her, could reawaken parts of that, that trauma for her, and talks about how that's been a thing going on with her, but how she wants to move past that. She talks about, an old story involving Hyodo where they were on a golfing trip when she was a kid, and Haru fell down and started crying, and Hyodo was, like, kind of stern with her, but it didn't bother Haru because she knew Hyodo was kind, and that her being stern was her caring in that moment and knowing she needed to act that way. And so talks about how no matter how many times you fall, you can get back up. You have to take a stand. You can't ignore the reality around you, and just kind of a really emotional coming to terms with both her grief, but also the extensions of what that grief has done to her kind of, like, wider emotional life.
Yeah, and also, like, this is such an important thing because, A, it's the most emotional we've ever seen Haru get in either game, right? Like, she sounds like she's going to cry in a couple spots. Usually Haru is a very, very reserved character. So to see her open up like that is significant. Absolutely. But also, B, this gives Haru a moment that she never got in the base game, which is a chance to actually grieve.
We just moved real quick.
We moved so quick past that, where she was kind of just like, well, he was my father, but he was doing terrible things, so, like, I have to get over this, is kind of like how it happened. And instead, you sort of get, like, moments with Haru talking about that, but she never really, like, has a moment to address it full on in the game. Yeah. And in this game, she's straight up calls out, she's like, I think when my dad died, I just sort of locked all of the memories about him in a box and put them away because they were too painful. And now seeing her, Hyodo, has reopened that box. And, like, that is significant for the storytelling, for this character, for what it means in relation to her character in the first game. It is, like, such a big moment, and so not what you're expecting from, like, a funsies road trip spin-off game. You know what I mean?
No, totally. The vibe of the game originally doesn't, I think, indicate the emotional levels. Even before this, I think it is the most emotionally resonant, you know, of the three, I guess, characters who have been focused on.
Yeah.
But even those other ones, I don't think I would have expected. And so to see it continue to progress this way, and I think, as you said, to give her that moment that essentially the first game robs her of, and you can argue about whether it's bad or it works within the context of that game. Like, all that aside, I like the fact that she gets this time to actually think through it, the fact that she's presented with all of this as something she needs to reckon with, I think works really well here. And I do think is...
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about, I think, a lot of issues, at least I'm having with the game in terms of some of the repetitiveness on the mechanical side, but without a doubt, the story and character stuff, I think, is really good. I think it's doing a really good job of building on the first game and not just feeling like a repetition of the first game.
Yeah, it's a great moment. I'm very glad it happened.
Me too. Anyway, after that, of course, we get another of our Sophia conversations about why is Haru upset. And why she tries so hard for, you know, to care for someone else and all that sort of stuff. And we'll get more of her emotional beats as this goes on.
Yes.
Anyway, August 12th, Hyodo is having a campaign rally, but calling cards are appearing everywhere, of course. And she freaks out in the palace. And this is the first time we see Shadow Hyodo.
Yeah.
But it's shrouded in shadow. We just get the eyes, but you can tell she doesn't look like Hyodo. There's a bit of a difference there, and we'll get to that in a little bit. I do want to point out, when this happens, she is presented on screen as essentially mostly in, like, a black screen, but her eyes are just, like, yellow eyes are just staring out with a faint outline of a face. Loki, my dog, hates on TV when a face is on screen and is just looking at you. He does not like still images of faces on our TV.
Okay.
It, like... you know, if you let Netflix run too long and it goes to the, like, fading of, like, different TV shows and it like, recommends things, but it's just, like, key art.
Yeah.
If the key art involves a person looking out at you, he gets furious.
Wow.
So anyway, I was reading through the dialogue, and then all of a sudden I just hear from, like, the corner of our couch, just low rumbles of a growl start to form. Like, what's going on? And then I see him staring dead-eyed at Hyodo of just, like, I am going to murder whoever this is. So Loki is an honorary Phantom Thief, is what I'm saying.
Makes sense.
Anyway, we get a little sense of this, of sort of Hyodo, and then, of course, we go in, and we confront her, and it's a very different Hyodo than the group is expecting, and then I was expecting, and that the theme kind of changes very quickly, and essentially Shadow Hyodo is a total glutton at a feast. She is at an ice table in her ice palace, with a bunch of food laid out around her. Obviously, the character model is a different one from the sort of Hyodo in the real world. They show her as a bit more fully, you know...
she looks like Ursula from The Little Mermaid.
Yes, and the transformation seems to then go to, like, what if Ursula was just a face?
Yeah. I actually do really love the design of the boss itself. This, like, weird tentacle monster with a giant stomach with a mouth is, like it's very, very odd in a very cool Persona way.
Yes, yeah.
And I will point out that the bird cages, when you enter them, say for a moment when you're given the prompt to click on them, bird cage of, and then one of the sins. Mm-hmm. Alice's was lust. Ongo's was, I believe, vanity. This one is gluttony. It is following the same pattern of sins as the palaces in the first game did with those. So that is why this one is gluttony, maybe. There's a helicopter going over my house. It's very loud. I'm sorry. The other thing that I kind of tried to relate this food to was that it's related to Okumura, who ran a food company. Otherwise, I think this theme is insane and extremely weirdly, like, off-putting in a very real way.
It just comes out of nowhere.
The only reference she makes to why it could make sense to her character is she says something about it being a dog-eat-dog world, and it's either eat or be eaten, I think is what she says. It feels wildly out of character. I don't understand why she is a glutton. It doesn't have anything to do with, like, it's not like she's embezzling funds from the city. Like, it feels so weird that my wife was literally, who was watching, was literally like, it feels like they changed this character at some point mid-development, or they changed the theme of the level at some point mid-development, and just, like, kept this part and didn't change it with the other stuff.
Yeah, there's nothing other than, like we had said earlier, the utensils that you see in the background for, like, one cutscene. There's no rhyme or reason that it plays into it, and at least in the other two, those sins play into their themes very well. This just doesn't. It's just so discordant and comes out of nowhere. And I was just like, what?
Yeah, it's also like neither of the other two palace rulers looked different, right?
Yeah.
Or jail monarchs, and like it's worth pointing out that like this is pretty problematic in a weird way of like, oh, she's thin and pretty in the real world, but then she's like a big fat monster who eats everything in the like it's just like that's like, why are you doing that? That's so offensive. Like,
yeah, it's really
what the
weird
hell
that happens with a theme that also doesn't even tie into what was happening through all of it.
Yeah, like if her themes of her character had anything to do with food or eating or anything like that, like maybe you have a leg, like a little bit of a leg to stand on, but even probably then it's still kind of offensive.
Yes,
like,
yeah,
it just more feels of the, like, so unnecessary.
At least I would have been able to track the thought process there, but here it's just like, yeah, where did this, and even the characters seem surprised, which is the oddest part to me, is that at least it happened, even if it was a change in development, and obviously we don't know, it was a change early enough that they could add the dialogue to make them surprised. And I was just like, what is it's like you said, the persona villain that she turns into, like the monster, it's an interesting design, especially when you fight it, and she sort of, the fight is her, you know, swallowing one of the party members at a time, and you have to essentially knock them out of her. Like, that all works, but yeah, it coming in as a theme, both on problematic and just like thought through line, doesn't track for me.
It doesn't work on any axis, basically. And the boss fight itself is interesting until it goes slow-mo, right? Like, I think it's like a very fun boss in that, like, she'll turn red and you can knock down the chandeliers, which will turn her back to ice, and that kind of weakens her in the eating mechanic you said. But then about halfway through the fight, she causes a blizzard, and then all of your movement is like ungodly slow for the rest of the fight. And I feel like if the speed was maybe just a little bit faster, I would be more into this gimmick, but it is so slow. All your movement is so slow that it just kind of gets a little bit obnoxious by the end.
No, it's a lot. It's also very amusingly, I should have known they were there for a reason, but I just immediately, because I was just pressing the buttons, I was like, I'm jumping on the chandeliers, and I used them all very early in the fight, and then didn't have them for later. I ran into some fun problems there, but yeah, like as a fight, I think most of it is a good fight. And it uses the space well. I think the chandeliers, for their stated purpose, work well. I think that mechanic of her taking away a party member at a time works well, but yeah, just on a story level, no. Anyway, and
then it goes like, this is the crazy thing is you beat her, and conversation aside, right, like, this theme is never brought up again.
Yep. Yeah, she basically, after you defeat her, is like, I wanted to wipe out all of Sapporo's injustice. She's not even making, like, eating puns about it. Which
her whole thing has been about cleaning.
Yep.
Like, make her a janitor. What? I don't get it.
From mayor to janitor. I mean, like, you have Ice Queen right there, though. Like, it's literally just such a big trope.
It's remarkable. It is just such a remarkable, out of left field, unnecessary, offensive, strange thing to do, right?
Yeah. Anyway, you defeat her, and she talks about everything. It's that whole, the wrap-up sort of speech, and Haru talks to her, discussing what we've now learned about sort of what caused this progression for her to sort of descend in the way she has. She
tells
knew
her to stand up.
Yes, exactly. She knows all about the girl's death and how her staff betrayed her, and all these things, and the shadow version of her tries to make the argument that she would only be replaced by greedy scum, and that there would be, someone worse if she wasn't there, staying in there. Again, right. The eat or be eaten thing happens, I think, in this part is mentioned again, and that's about it. But Haru basically just tells her what she told Haru all those years ago, not to give up. Some people will stick by her, like if she's really a good person at her core and people know that, they will stick with her. She may have to climb back up a hill to a certain extent, but if she's meant to do good, she will be able to do the good if she sticks to doing it, basically.
Yeah.
So
there's also a line that tickled me where Hyodo says, "Haru, your father must be so happy for you in heaven," and I was like, "I don't know about that."
He didn't end up there, let me tell you.
No, I don't know.
The Christianity side of it, a part that we don't have time to get into for this world, probably not in heaven.
Yeah.
Anyway, the day ends. We move to the 13th. We're at the park. We hear Hyodo's having a conference. It's one of those, she's in a press conference room talking to all the microphones and the press. And, of course, she admits to kind of what happened. And it's a shock for people. She spells it all out. She tells her side of the story as Haru told her to do. We see all of this fall out. And then, of course, it's like, well, what happens to her next? Luckily, Zenkichi calls. She'll be a key witness in helping figure all of this stuff out. He's, of course, her personal chauffeur. And so he can not only help us take a look at her phone, but can get us some alone time with her. So cut to her at the park where the girl died, the spot before that we had, been preceded. Haru approaches her. Hyodo thanks Haru for helping her see the light. She kind of apologizes. And again, here we got more about Haru's emotional, journey. She apologizes for adding turmoil to Haru's life after a time where she must obviously be grieving about her father's death, a thing she didn't get to do. So, she talks about all this, but that she'll always be there for Haru. And then we kind of get a pickup from what's happened after the press conference. A woman appears. You kind of assume it's the mom, and obviously it's revealed to be, but she's angry that Hyodo is resigning. Ryuji wants to intervene at this point, but I think it's Makoto who's like, no, let's let this play out.
Right.
The woman essentially is like, no, you don't get to run away. Like, become mayor again, do what's right, do the good work, and kind of, as was hinted before, is like, if she feels she can do good, there will be people who want her to do good. Some, will back her. Some will be like, no, you owe us this.
And she speaks to her character, right? Where she's like, you stayed with me the whole time that, like, I was grieving, and I know you are a good person.
Exactly.
So fight back and do it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, again, Sophia's confused about all this, knows it's sad, but it feels warm and kind. What is this feeling? Tell me, Joker.
Sophia unlocked happiness. Yay.
Bing. I wish she had in-game achievements that would, like, appear on screen. That would be really funny, for each new emotion. Anyway, you also then, after this is all over, why don't we ride the Ferris wheel?
Yeah, well, real quick, on this Hyodo thing, I also do want to say, I think it's interesting because you don't really get a moment like this with any monarch or jail leader this extensively, right? Where you actually know this person really well and you have a reconciliation that is very, very positive rather than being, like, horribly traumatic, right?
Absolutely. It's emotional on a resonant level.
Yeah. And then the Ferris wheel comes out of nowhere, you get a date. There's dating in this game, kind of, but not really.
So that was my thing, was like, I know I have who I dated in the first game. Obviously, this game doesn't care about that. I know it's sort of a date, but after everything we went through, I took Haru on the Ferris wheel because I'm not a soulless monster. And after turning her down on her birthday in the last game, I felt like maybe I owed her. To me, it just seemed like wrong not to, after everything we'd gone through, go on the Ferris wheel with Haru.
Well,
who did you?
Was it the yellow gondola?
No, I said it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
I didn't
Well,
want to leave it on.
I took Haru because she's my girlfriend, even though we haven't mentioned that in a month.
Yes.
But she still is. The first time I did it, I took the person I had been dating in Persona 5 Royal, and then I also saved beforehand and reloaded and did it with Ryuji and Yusuke.
Nice.
Just because I wanted to do it with Ryuji and Yusuke to see what would happen.
Do you do it with them together or?
Yeah.
Oh, cute. Okay.
I think you take Sophia too. I think you pull out Sophia on your phone. It's like it's a group trip.
Yeah, I just felt like it was the right thing to do to take Haru after everything she'd been through.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If there's another date, I'll take Makoto.
I think this is a funny solution in this game, right? Where it's like there's not dating, there's not social links, but there's a moment to just be like, hey, pick a friend and go onto a romantic Ferris wheel ride with them. Is
Exactly.
like, it's cute that they make room for that, right?
Yes.
Even if it's not a formal mechanic.
Yeah, it falls in line with the other sort of like moments that we've gotten. This one is just like the thing you need to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, after all that, it's sort of the big debrief and kind of sets us up for where we're going next.
And this conversation is significant.
It is, and I know we're running a little long, so I want to get through all the info and then we can chat about it. But basically, nothing new from Hyodo when it comes to details about what's going on. Zenkichi is here. He gives us her phone.
Just the same deal, basically. Same Emma, same someone watching it.
Yeah, someone watching, but nothing else really new about it. What we're getting the sense of, though, here is that they're not the same as palace rulers. The monarchs don't have twisted enough wills to create treasures, and now that we've seen this enough times, we kind of get to the idea that we don't think they're creating the jails. And
yeah, Morgana comes up with the theory, right, that lays out a couple things, saying none of the monarchs are truly evil in the way that any of the jail rulers were, so there has to be somebody else behind this. And the two pieces of evidence, you can go ahead, I think, if you were going to say something, but...
I was just going to go into it was going to be about the bird cages.
Yeah, the two pieces of evidence that Morgana brings up that are, like, significant in my eyes, right, are... Because there's no treasure, it means their desires weren't twisted enough to actually, like, make a jail, because that's what happened in Persona 5, was the desires would twist that would distort reality around them. But if their desires weren't twisted enough to turn into a treasure, then they weren't twisted enough to create a palace, which means they weren't twisted enough to create a jail, which means they didn't create the jail.
Yes, yeah. And then the second aspect of it is that we always see them in bird cages, and originally we thought it was a like sort of security thing of protecting them from anyone who would want to hurt them outside, but we sort of question why these doors exist, and maybe it's in fact that the monarchs are being kept in them rather than the cages protecting them. So essentially they're trapped is what we're getting.
That's the second big revelation, is the trauma is the lock, because then if the monarch tries to leave, they'll touch this wall and they'll see their most traumatic memory, which is super messed up, and then they won't want to leave, which is another huge kind of revelation of, like, they didn't create the jails and they're actually being held there against their will.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense, because it is like, if you wanted to leave, why would you want the easy way to leave to be to re-experience your traumatic events? So it really follows through here on, I think, some stuff that you could kind of get a sense of, and I think especially in this jail in particular, I was starting to get a sense of, like, something feels different here. And them laying it out really, I think, brings it all together. So they've kind of got the sense of that overarching idea that we had already that ties into the fact that the jails still exist after, we defeat the monarch. It's not related to them so specifically. So, that even then creates the shadows that are protecting the keys. It makes them a little bit more sinister and almost makes them sort of the villains that we don't know too much about. One of them mentions. So we're kind of at this point where it's like we assume Medice would be the most likely culprit, but we can't just storm their HQ because we don't have physical evidence. Like, Zenkichi can't create a search warrant, basically, because all of this is in another dimension.
Right.
So anyway, they talk about all that, and then Ichinose calls for some other information. No major differences that they found between, Emma originally and earlier, but then they took a look at the changelog and noticed that Emma was transported at one point to Okinawa. Medice apparently has a research lab there that they keep quiet. We tell everyone about this, but essentially they have a secret research lab. And, if I may, Their first response about the research lab in Okinawa is how amazing an opportunity it will be to see the sights and food of Okinawa. That is the first reaction. And literally all of them say something. It's like everyone has a thing to talk about.
Yeah, I think I wrote them down or I took a picture. An says crystal clear waters. Haru says Shisa statues. Futaba says juicy pineapples. And Yusuke says Chinsuko cookies. And then you're given an opportunity to say your own thing. But I love that that's just like, this is a dire situation, people. And you're excited about pineapples and cookies?
We found out there is a secret lab that is probably, a key to unlocking everything. And then #ad appears on screen. And they chat about everything great about Okinawa. It's just really fun.
I hear you can get cheap rooms there, too.
Oh, interesting. But unfortunately, Okinawa is pretty far.
Yes.
So we'll get to that in a second. Zenkichi gets a call that he's kind of like hush-hush about. He doesn't like to say too much.
Well, Zenkichi first is like, Okinawa is so far, we gotta fly, probably.
Yes,
right?
But we can't fly.
Yeah. And then he gets this call.
Yeah. And we essentially have to go by car.
Yeah.
But he wants to stop in Kyoto because that's where his, work is. He can sort of debrief, get a little bit of, setting the stage, figuring out things.
The call was him arguing with someone, right? This is like all very suspect, right? Because it's a girl who was like him arguing with someone about how he has work to do. And then he gets hung up on, and then immediately he's like, all right, we're going there, and we got to stop by Kyoto, and I'm driving. And everyone's like, wait, that was a quick switch.
Yeah, it happens very drastically, and he's going to be along for the ride. Essentially, for me, because it's really funny, the Sapporo sort of like date and objective, to me, as I said earlier, I thought was going to be the end of the game. So now we sort of get the next few legs of the game laid out here, where he's like, we're going to stop in Kyoto, which I'm like, okay, of course, there'll be a jail there. Then we go to Kobe, which will, of course, probably have a jail there. And then we have to take a ferry over to Okinawa. So he's going to come with us. We need to take the expressway, which is a 21-hour trip.
Yeah.
And one other thing I love about here is that he's like, wait, Makoto, you've been driving the whole time? And he's like, Haru, what the hell? Come on, you need to drive too.
Shame Haru briefly.
Yeah. It's like, she's been through some stuff, man. Give her a break. But, they basically decide the next few legs of the trip.
Yeah, and to quickly lay out where on the map, not distances, but where on the map this is, we talked about how Sapporo is way up north, right? Imagine, this is a bad description, but imagine Japan as kind of a backwards L, if you will, where the L is sort of like slanted a little bit down. Tokyo, this is rough. Sapporo's at the top of the L. Tokyo is kind of at the point where it curves, it changes direction. Mm-hmm. Kyoto is a ways to the left of that, kind of south. It's southwest of it. And then where they're going, Okinawa. Okinawa is an island way further south. Like, it is way, way, way further south. So they are going to have to either fly or take a boat. And so they're going all the way down past where they already were in Tokyo to go to Kyoto, and then they're going to go to the coast and take a boat all the way down to Okinawa. So, like, they are going pretty much from one extreme of Japan all the way to the other end of Japan.
Yeah, I just took a look at the map. I cannot recommend enough that you go look at a map of Japan to see this arc, because, oh boy, is it wild.
It is pretty much the farthest trip they could possibly go on.
Yeah.
I mean, not literally, but, like, in terms of, like, big Japanese landmarks and cities, it is pretty much from the largest major city to the other largest majors, or to, like, from end to end.
Yeah, it's just the entire country. They're just going through the entire country. So yeah, a lot left for us to get into, I assume. I don't know. But a big week in terms of, I think, hinting at the larger machinations of whoever, if it's Tony Stark himself or someone else, is behind all this. But yeah, we'll have to leave that all for the weeks to come.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tom, before we wrap up, what is your pop quiz question for this week?
Alrighty. I have one. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah. So here's the question. You have a request to get the king of all ramen. you have to go get a meal ticket. The meal tickets are sold at the pharmacy for some reason. The pharmacy guy doesn't want to sell them because the ramen maker's elbow is bad and could blow out at any moment from making too much ramen. So that's unsolvable unless, of course, he had a compression sleeve. But there's nowhere you could get a compression sleeve that would be made from the perfect material except the metaverse. So you go in to complete this request to kill Mothman. I'm going to get really specific with this request or this quiz because it's going to be a hard one this week. I don't know if anybody's going to get it. We'll see. The request is to kill Mothman in the Sapporo jail to get some material to give to this person to make a compression sleeve, because it's the perfect material to make a compression sleeve out of and can only be harvested apparently from Mothman in the Sapporo jail. This is not an item. It doesn't say it anywhere, but if you read the request, because you read the full paragraph for every single request, correct?
I'm looking through to see if I have any notes, but
if you read the request, there is a capitalized, kind of like it was an item at one point, but then it didn't become an actual item thing that you are getting as the material for this compression sleeve. If you can tell me in vague terms what that is a great answer. If you can tell me specifically what that 2-word item is, that's even better. That's the quiz. What are they getting from Mothman in the metaverse to make a compression sleeve for the ramen man?
Well, I'll let you all figure that one out.
And you thought corn was weird.
Can you do another corn quiz? Well, I'll see if anyone gets that because I don't have anything written down, so we'll see if anyone out there does. If you do have an answer, you can write into dornology@gmail.com. You can leave a comment on the YouTube version of the show at youtube.com/dornology, or you can write in on Twitter. I'm at @Dornbush, and Tom is at Tom R. Marks. Again, if you're enjoying the show, don't forget to leave a review, or the stars, or the thumbs, or the subscribe buttons, or whatever. As we always appreciate it, and especially as we get closer and closer to P5 Royal coming out on other platforms. Happy to
And don't forget to read those request descriptions.
Yes, apparently don't forget to read everything.
That's partly why I'm doing this, because there's some fun stuff in there, and I feel like I click through it way too quickly sometimes.
That's very fair. Well, I'm excited to see if anyone gets it, but whether or not you do, let us know also what you thought of the jail this week, what you thought of the story and everything. We'll read some comments on next week's show. But that is going to pretty much do it for us on this week's episode. Tom, thank you so much for joining me. And as always, corn.
Bye.